You know what's funny about privacy in 2025? It died, and nobody held a funeral. We just collectively agreed to pretend that broadcasting your breakfast was normal human behavior. But here's the thing about the people who don't post. The ones who watch you perform your life in real time, while their own profiles sit there like abandoned storefronts. You think they're hiding something. You think they're judging you, and you know what? You're half right. See, there's this pattern that keeps showing up. Someone stops posting on social media, and suddenly everyone around them gets nervous. Like their silence is somehow louder than your 3 stories about the gym this morning. That's not an accident, that's the system working exactly as designed. Social media taught us something brilliant. It taught us that existence without documentation is somehow less real. You didn't really go to that restaurant unless you photographed the menu. You didn't really have fun at that party unless you proved it to 600 people who weren't there. And the people who opt out? They're the ones who noticed something everyone else is too busy performing to see. They noticed that you can't actually live your life and curate it at the same time. Here's what actually happens when someone goes dark on social media. First, there's relief. Like taking off shoes that were 2 sizes too small, but you wore them anyway, because everyone said they looked good. Then there's this weird guilt, because you were trained to believe that privacy is suspicious, that if you're not sharing, you must be hiding. As if the default state of human existence is supposed to be a reality show where you're both the star and the camera crew. But the pattern goes deeper than that. The people who don't post aren't just avoiding the noise. They figured out that the game is rigged. Every time you post something, you're not sharing your life. You're offering it up for judgment. And then you sit there, phone in hand, refreshing to see if strangers approved of your existence today. That's not connection. That's a slot machine that pays out in dopamine hits and existential dread. You know what nobody talks about? The fact that we created a world where not participating in your own surveillance is considered antisocial. Think about that. We built a system where the default expectation is that you'll voluntarily document everything, catalog it, and make it searchable. And the people who say no thanks, they're the weird ones. The real psychology here isn't about introversion or social anxiety or fear of judgment. It's about something way more uncomfortable. It's about the difference between living and performing, and most people can't tell anymore where one ends and the other begins. There's this question that keeps coming up: am I having fun, or am I just showing people that I'm having fun? That question is a virus. Once it's in your head, you can't unask it. Every moment becomes split. Half of you is experiencing it, half of you is already thinking about how to frame it for an audience that isn't even there. And the people who don't post? They just stop splitting themselves in half. Now here's where it gets interesting. The system doesn't just want your content, it wants your anxiety about the content. It wants you checking if people liked it. It wants you rewriting captions. It wants you deleting posts that didn't perform well enough. Because that's when you're most engaged. Not when you're happy. When you're worried. The people who don't post figured out they were working a second job they never applied for. Content creator for an audience of people they barely know. Maintaining a brand that's supposed to be their authentic self. Except you can't have an authentic self that requires this much maintenance. There's a reason why privacy is power. It's not because secrets are currency. It's because the moment you stop broadcasting, you stop being a product. You become illegible to the algorithm. And that drives the system crazy, because the system needs you performing to keep the whole thing running. Think about what we actually gave up. We traded mystery for visibility. We traded presence for performance. We traded being known by a few people who matter for being seen by hundreds who don't. And we called it connection. The people who don't post aren't better than you. They're not morally superior. They just got tired earlier. Tired of translating lived experience into content. Tired of the math. 3 likes from close friends versus 30 from acquaintances. Which one means you're doing life right? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people who are heavily active on social media aren't sharing their lives. They're managing their image. And image management is exhausting. It requires constant vigilance. You can't just exist. You have to exist in a way that photographs well and generates engagement, and doesn't make anyone uncomfortable but also isn't boring. That's not living. That's a performance review that never ends. And the people who opt out, they're not missing out. They're watching you miss your own life, while you're busy proving you have one. They're at the same dinner table, actually tasting the food instead of lighting it correctly. They're having the same conversation, actually listening, instead of thinking about how to reference it later. But here's what makes this whole thing dark. The system convinced everyone that this is normal, that constant self-promotion is just how humans communicate now, that if you're not building your personal brand, you're falling behind. Behind what? Behind people who are also performing their lives instead of living them? The real psychology of people who don't post is simple. They remembered that life happened before everyone was watching. And it was better. Not because the experiences were different, because they were actually experienced instead of immediately converted into content. You want to know the secret? The people who don't post aren't hiding from judgment. They're refusing to audition for strangers. Every post is an audition. Every story is asking for approval. Every photo is saying, please validate that I'm doing this right. And at some point, some people just decided they didn't need the approval anymore. That's not antisocial. That's actually having a self that doesn't require external validation to exist. Now you're sitting here watching this, and you're thinking about your last post. You're wondering if you're the performer or the person who stopped performing. And that right there is the point. The fact that you have to wonder means you already know. The system works because it made performing feel mandatory. It made silence feel suspicious. It made privacy feel like you have something to hide instead of something to protect. And the people who don't post? They just stop playing a game where the only way to win is to never stop playing. So here's your choice. You can keep broadcasting your life to an audience that's too busy broadcasting their own to actually pay attention to yours. Or you can go dark. Not because you're better than everyone else, but because you finally figured out that your life doesn't need an audience to be real. The people who don't post aren't broken. They're not scared. They're not missing the point. They got the point earlier than everyone else. The point is this. You can't be present and performing at the same time, and presence is what actually matters. Privacy isn't hiding. It's keeping something for yourself in a world that taught you that everything should be shared. And the moment you realize that, you stop needing to prove anything to anyone, including yourself. That's the psychology, that's the pattern. And that's why silence online isn't absence, it's just people who remembered what presence actually feels like.